the Cincinnati Bengals. The Cincinnati Bengals have $45 million in cap space. They don't have to make any roster cuts because they don't have any bad contracts. They have 28 pending free agents, and these are the most notable ones. A.J. Green, who's been a longtime Bengal, Sean Williams, John Ross, who is their former first-round pick, who has been disappointing thus far, Mackenzie Alexander, William Jackson, Josh Bynes, and Carl Lawson. And their positions of need are center, guard, and outside linebacker, in my opinion. They run a 4-3 defensive scheme, and I think it's easier to find outside linebackers for that scheme. But I think this offseason is about trying to build an offensive line for when Joe Burrow comes back. He's going to have an offensive line, and guys they can target are Alex Mack at center because Billy Price is horrible, Corey Lindsey, David Andrews, Ted Karras, Austin Ryder, Matt Skura. At guards, you got DJ Fluker, Kelechi Osemele, Mike Upati, Austin Blythe, John Feliciano, Brian Winters. And at outside linebacker for their scheme fit, a guy like Devondre Campbell or KJ Wright, Conor Gruger-Hill, Malcolm Smith, Alex Anzalone. I think those are some guys that they can target. But ultimately in the draft, I mean, we all think the pick is going to be Penny Sewell. Yeah. I mean, there are some guys who say that they're going to draft Jamar Chase. I've seen some mock drafts show Jamar Chase. But I think you got to try to draft Penny Sewell. If a team tries to trade up to your spot to get a quarterback, I'd trade down and get those picks and then have more picks to get offensive linemen.
You could get Darisaw if you drop back too, but I've also seen that Sewell is falling back and Darisaw is climbing up the board. So that top 10 is really volatile this year. You don't know what's going to happen.
Penny Sewell isn't that generational guy that he probably is, but at least he's not being ranked as that right now. I mean, in my opinion, I would draft Penny Sewell, and I'd probably go with a guy like Austin Ryder at center, and I wouldn't keep A.J. Green. And I think he's done in Cincinnati. He's been wanting out for a while. I don't think the Bengals need to get a wide receiver. I think T. Higgins showed what he can do last season. Tyler Boyd is a very good slot. And people sleep on this guy. But Auden Tate is really, really good. He just hasn't had any opportunity to play because the wide receiver room has been stacked. But now that if A.J. Green potentially leaves and Auden Tate gets that shot, I think he's going to be very good in that role.
Yeah, and T. Higgins was awesome last year. And you kind of hit on what I was going to talk about. I don't think wide receiver is nearly as big of a need as people make it out to be. With that group of three, maybe you could add a wide receiver later in the draft or a cheaper guy in free agency, but I would target the draft a little bit later on because it's a pretty deep draft. But for me, no-brainer, the pick is Sewell at, wherever they end up picking, whether it's trading back or staying put. I think Sewell's the pick. I've heard people say that he is the generational talent that Chase Young was at edge. He is that on the offensive line. You can't miss that, especially after you just saw what happened to Joe Burrow this past season. It would be complete miscarriage of management to not draft an offensive lineman. So I'm definitely going Sewell. If not, the only thing I would do is potentially trade back and get Darisaw or whoever falls, whether it's Darisaw getting picked earlier and Sewell falling. But that would be my pick in the first round. As for the free agents, there's really only two guys that I would target to bring back, and I've mentioned them a couple times for different teams. I think Carl Lawson, more importantly, and William Jackson are the two guys that I would target to bring back. Carl Lawson especially because without him, their pass rush is essentially non-existent. Personally, I wouldn't mind seeing Geno Atkins go for the money you would save cutting him, but Carl Lawson and William Jackson are really the two free agents that I would key in on bringing them back. And then I think offensive line is where you just have to bang home on this offseason.
I actually thought that the Bengals' defense was very underrated last season. I don't think they have to make much moves to try to improve the defense. They have a lot of guys like DJ Reader is very good. I would keep Geno Atkins. Logan Wilson wasn't so great as a rookie, but he was a rookie. William Jackson, we know he's phenomenal. For me, though, because Joe Burrow is probably going to be hurt or he might sit out the entire year next season, if Jacoby Brissett is on the open market, I'd give Jacoby Brissett a contract and have him be the quarterback for the team, for the Bengals for that year. Or Jacoby Brissett or Tyrod Taylor. I think both of those guys just come in and fill in, because I'm not sold on Ryan Finley, and I forgot who else was starting for them during the year. I don't even remember, but I'm just not sold on the guys that they have right now. I think Brandon Allen was starting for them for a couple games, but I think you got to bring in a competent quarterback. That's Tyrod Taylor or Jacoby Brissett, because not only are they going to help you win, but also by bringing in a quarterback who's competent at least, you'll see where your roster stands. You know, how good or how bad is your roster. In my opinion, like in the draft, they should target, of course, I think Penei Sewell is a no-brainer guy, but later in the draft, Quinn Manners to replace Billy Price, and at edge, Joseph Osai, Kwity Paye, Rashad Weaver, Joe Tryon, Quincy Roche, Patrick Jones, and at tight end, Brevin Jordan. You know, I think CJ Uzomah, he's okay, but I think they need to get a tight end, and I really love Brevin Jordan. And at inside linebacker, they need another cover guy to maybe, you know, replace Logan Wilson or play on the outside linebacker spot. I think that can be Jabril Cox out of LSU. He's really fantastic. He's going to fall later in the draft, and I think those are some good notable guys that they can draft.
Yeah, and I like what you mentioned, bringing in a guy like Brissett potentially, just because it doesn't even have to be a one-year deal. It could be maybe a multi-year, smaller deal. And I said it with the Colts, keeping a veteran guy like that in the quarterback room is so important. The Jets did it when they drafted Sam Darnold, bringing in Josh McCown, and although it didn't pay off in the long run, Josh McCown was huge for that team. After starting for them for one season where they were all right, he stayed around, and he was almost like having a second quarterback coach in. And Jacoby Brissett, he's been around the league. He's been in great systems in New England with great quarterbacks. He was in Indianapolis with Andrew Luck. I believe he was there when Andrew Luck was there. So he's been around great quarterbacks. He's been around great head coaches. Bringing him in would just bring more knowledge for a young guy like Joe Burrow. I think that would be a great move just to hold over for the season. In the later rounds of the draft, guys, they could target maybe Landon Dickerson and an offensive lineman from Alabama. If they wanted to go wide receiver in the second round because they have an early second-round pick, maybe Rondale Moore from Purdue. Wide receiver is a guy who could be available, but I think they're in really good shape, and they're a team like the Jaguars to me that could turn it around pretty quick. The only problem is the division is so good. They kind of have to hope that the Steelers fold under Ben Roethlisberger this season and Baker Mayfield doesn't take that next step. And then not this upcoming year, but I think the next year and the year after that, when Joe Burrow comes back, gets his legs under him. And I personally, as terrible as this is going to sound, I don't want it to be taken the wrong way. It could be a blessing in disguise that Joe Burrow is going to have to miss pretty much this whole year because, let's be honest, they're probably going to be pretty bad again, especially in that division, and it could result in another high pick, beef up that offensive line or your weapons even more, and Joe Burrow is coming back into a situation where he'll still be a very young quarterback. He showed what he can be in his early stage of his rookie year. And I think they're going to be in good shape moving forward these next few years.
So my potential depth chart for the Cincinnati Bengals is Joe Burrow, Joe Mixon, T. Higgins, Tyler Boyd, Auden Tate, C.J. Uzomah, Jonah Williams, Quentin Spain. They signed Austin Ryder. I think Penei Sewell gets drafted but plays the guard spot because Bobby Hart played really good at tackle last season. I think he's a starting tackle in the league, and they moved Penei Sewell to guard. Then on defense, Sam Hubbard, DJ Reader. They keep Geno Atkins. They don't cut him. They re-sign Carl Lawson. They draft Jabril Cox. They get Logan Wilson to start. They sign Devondre Campbell. And at cornerback, they keep William Jackson, Mackenzie Alexander, Trey Waynes is coming back, Von Bell, and Jesse Bates. I think this is a really good, competent roster. And if Joe Burrow does not play next year, you're bringing a guy like Jacoby Brissett, and let's see how good this team can be. Let's see if this team can be a 500 team, slightly below. I think right now in Jacoby Brissett's career, he wants to play. Yeah. And the Indianapolis Colts have not committed to him. Who knows if he's going to be back? Maybe he feels disrespected by the Colts because he felt like he earned it. And even after Philip Rivers retiring, Brissett might feel like he deserves that shot. So he might go to Cincinnati on a one-year deal, to prove himself.
To try out.
So I think it makes sense for both sides, but overall, this offseason to me is just about getting an offensive line for when Joe Burrow comes back, or if Joe Burrow does play next season, he's protected. He's protected.
And this season, when we were doing pick'ems, every time I saw the Bengals, when Joe Burrow was healthy, I gave it a second thought. And I think the Bengals next year, even without Joe Burrow, if they bring in a competent quarterback, I think they're going to be one of those teams that is going to put up a fight every Sunday.